He is the wrench in God's gears. You know, he's nature's dismal failure, right? Fear him, because he wants revenge. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Get that coffee. Hope you're doing well. Wait, what? I'm really tired today. I was driving across the state all day yesterday. But anyways, get that coffee if you got it. All right. Good to see you all. We went to this place in Jacksonville, though, on the way back home, which was just like magnificent fried chicken and champagne. It's this little gem called Silky's. I highly recommend it. It's an amazing place. Amazing food. If you're ever in Jacksonville or around that area, it's worth the visit. It's incredible. Yeah, I'm like 15 pounds heavier after that trip. Today's Child of God by Cormac McCarthy, published in 1973. Oh boy. This was a very kind gift from Dana Patrick Kelly. Thanks a bunch, man. Really appreciate it. A fellow McCarthy enthusiast and an all-around good guy. So I had the opportunity to go up to Tennessee, a little outside Sevierville, to visit family for about a week in a cabin in the woods. So I decided to read a book that takes place in the area. It was my first time ever going to that area of the country. I've never been to the Smoky Mountains, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I thought it was gorgeous. I thought it was wonderful. I've been to Tennessee before, like Nashville and Chattanooga. I love Chattanooga. I didn't expect the nature of the area to be so stunning. I mean, I just didn't think of Tennessee as kind of mountainous, you know, for some reason. But the hiking up there is like really quite comparable to the Northwest. I mean, it's really beautiful. We hiked a little bit up, you know, the Alum Cave to Mount LeConte Trail. We went just a little bit past the cave, which is appropriate for today's story. I looked for black bears around the cabin, you know, and everywhere we went, and I couldn't find any. Funny thing is, one of my patrons, who is also from the Tampa Bay area, happened to be visiting at the same time. Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet up, but apparently he saw a bunch of bears and I didn't. So shout out to Andrew. What's up, dude? So walking around out there in the countryside with a machete, realizing that, you know, there's something wandering around in there not too far away that could absolutely kill you, or at least, you know, fuck you up pretty good, was an interesting feeling. An appropriate experience for reading this one, you know? I mean, if you've read it, you know. So Child of God is McCarthy's third novel, comes after The Orchard Keeper and Outer Dark. And it takes place in the 60s, and it's speculated that he was inspired by a crime that took place near Chattanooga. It concerns a ne'er-do-well who does less well and even less well as time goes on, until you're presented with a picture of something quite strange. It's the story of a true outsider, right? The title comes from a line in the book describing our protagonist, Lester Ballard, a kind of backwoods degenerate turned necrophiliac serial killer, wandering around the wilderness of Sevier County, Tennessee. As McCarthy puts it, a child of God, much like yourself perhaps. And this is only on page 4, so right away you get some great writing. To watch these things issuing from the otherwise mute pastoral morning is a man at the barn door. He is small, unclean, unshaven. He moves in the dry chaff among the dust and slats of sunlight with a constrained truculence. Saxon and Celtic bloods. A child of God, much like yourself perhaps. And that line totally sets up the tone for the entire book, which is one short and cutting black comedy about an up-to-no-good hillbilly and his, like, ascetic struggle to simply exist. It's a kind of portrait of desolation, of both mind and spirit, of complete and utter social ostracization, the story of a lost cause, a good-for-nothing, someone who is completely inept at being part of society. In that respect, you know, a total failure. But unfortunately, for society that is, not stupid, and certainly not weak-willed. In fact, Ballard is so driven to do the things he does, over the period of time he does, that it's an almost mythological struggle. It's like the origin ghost story of a notorious Tennessean serial killer. Truly nightmare fuel, if there ever was. I mean, in the end, the guy inhabits a cave and drags the bodies there, you know? It's placing them on various levels of rock as if in some religious offering to a satanic deity. The whole book is sort of a question of, was the man born that way? Or was he shaped that way through the circumstances of his experience on Earth? You know? It's not obvious which is true in this book. Certainly he did not have an easy life. His father committed suicide and he found him. He's impoverished, of course, various things, but He certainly doesn't make the right choices, and so continues to descend further and further until you end up with what you end up. You know, his fate, his kind of hideous culmination. What's most striking about the book from the get-go, the first thing, of course, is the writing itself. It's pure McCarthy. In its greatest moments, he's usually describing landscapes or nature. At least those are the lines that I found myself drawn towards the most. I mean, and if you've read McCarthy, you know what it is. You know, it's immediately you're going to have sentences in the Faulknerian tradition of just totally incomparable word choice and beauty. But sometimes describing things which are so base or hideous, the contrast is fairly awe-inspiring, right? He captivates you with his word choice, always, you know, sniper accurate, yet evocative and often surprising. Perhaps he labored over these sentences, but, you know, the end product feels effortless, natural, you know, enviably so. The hardwood trees on the mountain subsided into yellow and flame into ultimate nakedness. An early winter fell, a cold wind sucked among the black and barren branches. Alone in the empty shell of a house, a squatter watched through the mote-blown glass a rim-shard of bone-colored moon come cradling up over the black balsams on the ridge, inked trees a facile hand had sketched against the paler dark of winter heavens. Drinkers gone to Kirby's would see him on the road by night, slouched and solitary, the rifle hanging in his hands as if it were a thing he could not get shut of. He'd grown lean and bitter. Some said mad. A malign star kept him. Yeah, the writing is, I mean, he's one of the best we have, right? America, that is. Maybe the best. How could you write such beautiful lines about something so terrible, right? That's a recurring question one asks oneself when reading McCarthy. It's characteristic of almost his whole body of work. And this character works to get bodies. Works very, very hard. Many of them. Not at first, though. It's kind of weird. We see his trajectory, right? Inspired by, it's speculated, crimes that happened around Chattanooga, Tennessee in the 60s. I've read that McCarthy was probably aware of them and inspired by them. Although they pale in comparison to what Ballard sets out to accomplish. You know, Ballard's first victims, they're a couple that are already dead in the car of this guy. You know, these young lovers that Ballard comes across in the wilderness. And they're already dead in the car. So he doesn't kill them. He just takes the woman and then does what he does. But after that, he starts killing people. What's so strange is that you never know how that couple, the first ones, died. You know, he just comes across these dead bodies in a car. The car is still running. So it's like those murders in Chattanooga, like as if this hillbilly just came across this crime scene, right? And just, that was kind of the pivotal moment for him where he just, you know, descends to become whatever he's going to become, which is worse than the murderer in the first place. So apparently James Franco interviewed McCarthy on the phone because Franco adapted this into a film. But he told Cormac that people were going to ask him why he made a film about a serial killer necrophile. So Franco asked McCarthy, you know, why did you write the book? And apparently McCarthy said something like, you know, oh, I don't know, James, probably some dumbass reason. If that's not the most McCarthy answer, I don't know what is. He doesn't give a damn about the pretensions to art, right? You know, he just wrote the fucking book. He made something. I appreciate this guy, you know? That's so much better than somebody saying like, oh, I wanted to make a statement about America's collective slip into moral depravity or something like, bullshit. You want to write a fucked up but well-written book about a cave-dwelling, demented hillbilly in Sevierville. That's why you write the book. That's why you do that. People like this exist, I think is McCarthy's point. I think he said this somewhere in an interview or something. They live out there, you know? Sometimes right next door. Fucked up shit is happening all around. You can read about it. And those are only the ones that have been caught, right? Whatever the reasons were at the time, you know, the reasons for doing so. I mean, hell, that was like, how long ago was that? That was like 50 years ago, you know? So it's like, who cares, right? It's basically his whole thing. Yeah, 50 years ago this year. That's crazy. Yeah, that book is 50 years old. That's wild to think about. Wow. 50 years. Huh. Huh. It's crazy. You see, we were up at the cabin. I was with my wife's family because we were celebrating her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And it occurs to me now, and I can't believe I didn't see this when I was there, they were married the year this was written. there was a big banner in the living room of the cabin, of 1973 with all the events and the things happening in culture at the time and all of this stuff that my wife had gotten for her folks, and hung it up. And it was kind of cool to look at so you could see what was going on the year they were married. And it just occurred to me that this book was published that year. So that's something. That's something. Anyways, the book really turns into kind of an arduous story of survival, of total defiance, really. I mean, it's like when McCarthy wrote this, he was poor as hell. He was living kind of in the same area outside of Knoxville, living a really kind of Spartan, ascetic, impoverished existence. It's a notorious story, right? His wife related the anecdote that he would stubbornly refuse speaking engagements regarding his writing that offered a good deal of money. Stubborn is a perfect word to describe McCarthy's attitude towards the world and its desires to mold him into something that he didn't want to be. One could say the same thing about Lester Ballard. As much of a fucked up cookie as he is, he does defiantly refuse to compromise. And the interesting thing about McCarthy is that that's what made McCarthy McCarthy, right? That's why he's so respected and well known today, because he diligently defied what society and the world wanted to do with him, to, package him up in this cookie cutter, productive member of society, filling whatever slot they were looking to fill, right? No. But if you say no, and you go through all the unbelievable, arduous shit that you have to deal with to become an author of his stature, you're going to stand out because you didn't do it like everybody else did, like how the world wanted you to be, right? You're an individual and you're respected for being one because you were an individual, because you truly did things how you wanted to do them. That's very rare, very, very, very rare. I mean, so it's no surprise that he's regarded as one of the greatest because he withstood the temptation to cop out and do what everybody else was doing, basically. He completely cut himself off from that. So there you go. Just because you do that doesn't mean you're going to be as good a writer as McCarthy, but I think he knew he had something. He knew he was capable, so he trusted himself and went for it in his own way, and it worked. Of course, we don't know the full story, so everybody has a side, right? But yeah, that's my impression, at least. So a lot of this, really impoverished living makes its way into this book, because McCarthy really had nothing, and Lester Ballard definitely has nothing. I mean, so it's tough. It's brutal. It's, he's starving. It's winter. It's his cabin burns down. I mean, he has like nothing. The man is subsisting on nothing. I once felt a kind of empathy for him. I didn't really, the character is not likable at all. But once I felt empathy for him. And it was after he drags home the corpse of the girl that he found, the first one. Already dead. She's already dead. He didn't kill her, but found her with another boy, also dead, in the car. And he takes her body home, and he builds a fire, and he sleeps with her body under the covers next to the fire. It was one of the loneliest, most unbelievably tragic things I think I've ever read in literature. Because for a split second you understand that this is the only woman who will ever lie with this man under the covers. That is, a corpse. He is absolutely and totally alone in this world. He is the wrench in God's gears. He's nature's dismal failure, right? Fear him, because he wants revenge. That's what the story is. It's one man's revenge against society. Pretty good theme for a novel, in my opinion. I mean, being a fan of Taxi Driver and stuff like that, I think that's about the best. But yeah. He also becomes very comfortable and capable with a rifle. Not good. For society, that is. It's very interesting to think about this book in terms of the homeless crisis spreading across the United States at the moment. After someone is homeless for years, not that I have any experience with it or that I've spoken at length with any homeless people, But it seems to me that after someone is homeless for years, whether it's due to drugs or something else, I'm not so sure, I'm not convinced that they're truly interested in re-entering the society that placed them in that position, even if the olive branch is extended. This is not to say that it's not their fault or that it wasn't their responsibility that they wound up how they did. It might have been, might not have been, might have in fact been a systemic failure. We don't know. It's case-by-case basis. You know, they vary wildly, and they're all very personal. But, you know, I think there's a case to be made that folks who go down that path and live in that world long enough are not only not capable of re-entering society, they're not even interested. That's definitely the story with Ballard. He's so psychologically divorced from normal culture that he's in a completely different world. He's gone crazy, which is exactly what happens to people on the street. You know, it's difficult to tell sometimes whether the drugs came first or the street came first. Often, if you're homeless, you're going to turn to that because that helps take away the pain, because obviously it's scarcely imaginable for somebody who hasn't dealt with it. But yeah, you go crazy, right? You go crazy, especially if you hit the drugs hard and you just go down that whole rabbit hole. Then that's a one-way ticket to insanity. But a lot of people are insane to begin with, and that's why they're on the street, and because they need help, but there's nowhere to go, and they can't function normally, you know. So, and then that combined with drug use, you see where this goes. Yeah, outside culture, right? Not because he chose to for spiritual or philosophical reasons, so much as he just failed to assimilate at all. Again, he's a hopeless lost cause. But reading about him is fascinating. Throughout the book, there are funny anecdotes from you know, small town folk, like townies. It's kind of how you learn about his past. You know, they're not all funny, but it's kind of how you learn about his past. But there's quite a bit of Southern humor placed within this book, which I think it might be a little difficult for people who are not American, and even in some parts of America, you know, the northern regions, to you know, it might be difficult for them to pick up what he's putting down, so to speak, because it's very, very Southern humor. It's very, it's like this kind of like simple relating of a tale at first that makes everything seem like it's less intelligent than it really is, and then he hits you in the end with this almost deadpan, cleverly set up, you know, punchline. It's very, very funny. One starts out with the guy talking about the history of Ballard's rifle skills, which are very, very good. But then it leads to him relating the time that he, the storyteller, not Ballard, the time when he was at a traveling carnival and he boxed a monkey, or an ape, in the boxing ring. He had a few drinks and stepped into the ring with him on a bet and got the shit beat out of him. When I read this, I laughed out loud. I thought it was so damn funny. It's so mean-spirited, of course, to make an ape do that, but, you know, he gets his revenge. Anyways, I come out and climbed in the ring there. Felt pretty much a fool. All my buddies out there are hollering and going on, and I looked down at this little gal I was with and give her a big wink, and about that time they brought the old ape out. Had a muzzle on him. He kindly looked me over. Well, they called out our names and everything. I forgot what the old ape's name was, and this old boy rung a big dinner bell, and I stepped out and circled the old ape. Showed him a little footwork there. He didn't look like he was going to do nothing much, so I reached out and busted him one. He just kindly looked at me. Well, I didn't do nothing but square off and hit him again. Popped him right in the side of the head. Wait for it. When I done that, this old head jerked back and his eyes went kindly funny, and I said, well, well, how sweet it is. I done spent the $50. I ducked around and went to hit him again, and about that time he jumped right on top of my head and crammed his foot in my mouth and like to tore my jaw off. I couldn't even holler for help. I thought they would never get that thing off of me. You gotta love the Revenge of the Ape. I don't know why it's so funny. I just think that's the funniest fucking thing. So yeah, it's not all hideously depraved, but well, it's kind of a depraved story, but you know, it's very much like, you know, this reminds me of when I read the watermelon scene aloud from Suttree, which, you know, takes place in the same area. That came after this one. And that was also very, very funny, you know, where, you know, the farmer and the guy are discussing the fellow who seems to be nocturnally violating the watermelons in the watermelon patch. Then the guy fills his shotgun with buckshot and catches him one night. And then catches him one night and shoots him in the ass. I think that's how it goes. I mean, McCarthy is actually, as dark as McCarthy is, he is really funny. I mean, when he wants to throw in a good joke here and there, I mean, it is really funny. McCarthy has a knack for capturing the southern small-town banter. One way of making a book convincingly dark, I've noticed, is to present some humor for contrast, right? McCarthy employs this strategy brilliantly. The only place where he failed to do so was in The Road, and I thought that was one of his worst books. So better than Food? No, not quite. Although I don't know, I did laugh. I loved a lot of the writing. It was really, really stellar. But I know it's just not his best, you know? It just kind of felt like an unfinished experiment that was a paver in the steps toward the greater works, you know? Those being Suttree, which is a perfect book, and Blood Meridian, which is not only a perfect book, it's astounding. So yeah, this book was not my favorite of McCarthy's for sure, but will it give you the creeps wandering around the winding roads outside of Sevierville, Tennessee? Abso-goddamn-lutely. I mean, this is creepy shit, right? It's a pretty good, it's not a ghost story, it's a serial killer story, and it's one of the best written that I've ever read. But it just kind of falls flat, doesn't really go anywhere, do anything surprising, in my opinion. So, don't know, something's missing. Something's missing. Couldn't say, gotta think about it more. Anyways, a fine ghost story, except with a real person, not a ghost. Just this rambling, diseased mind carving a half-life out of loving the dead. It's pretty good, but better than Food? Nah, not for me. Yeah, so you should read it. Well, I met a fellow named Andy in Savannah who had read this one several times, and then he spoke about Perfume, which is one of his favorite books. Perfume by Patrick Zuskind, in my opinion, is definitely the greater of these two novels. So if you've read neither, but the basic premise of this sounds interesting, then I recommend you read that one instead. First, at least. But if you've already read Perfume and loved it, this is kind of its grittier American necrophiliac cousin from the rural backwoods of Tennessee. I'm not really selling it, am I? Those who are into true crime novels or Southern Gothic literature for sure. If you like Flannery O'Connor, who I'm going to review soon, maybe stories of serial killers. Yeah, but if you're into like stuff like the Zodiac or Manson and all that, yeah, I think this would be up your alley. But for those who really appreciate the Southern Gothic genre, and I consider myself a part of that group, it's a must-read. It's very atmospheric, evocative, disturbing. A lot of scenes of human cruelty, so if that's not something you're interested in reading about, I would skip this one entirely. Unless, of course, your voyeurism gets the better of you. But I warned you. Yeah, definitely not everybody's cup of tea. Overall, there was plenty to appreciate in there, but having read the best of McCarthy, it's just not quite at that level. But interesting as an observation of his evolution, right? But yeah, I got bored with the character after a while. The plot's fairly simple. Personally, I'd say the real reason to read the book is if you appreciate McCarthy's writing style. It's not as flourishing as Suttree, but it's not as minimal as The Road. It's somewhere in between. I liked it. I liked the balance from the dialogue to the Faulknerian nature descriptions and back and forth, you know, so it was kind of cool how he balanced that. I wanted there to be more, but I just didn't. I just felt kind of empty by the end. But it was a fine atmospheric read, especially if you're visiting the area, but not one of McCarthy's strongest, in my opinion. Enough McCarthy for now. I know I just reviewed The Passenger and Stella Maris. I just had to review this one because I just traveled to the area and, you know, when am I going to get to do that again when it's still fresh in my mind, right? So, coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for watching. I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and for every review I do, I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out, they are sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. If I do say so myself. Currently it's from Sumatra. Been really into Sumatran coffee lately. If you'd like to get on that and help support the show, you can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books are better than food and donate $5 or more per video, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you. For $1 more, you'll get access to all the cool stuff listed below. And international shipping is included. So, thank you very much to all the patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Jeffrey J. Thanks a bunch, Jeff. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Child of God by Cormac McCarthy, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And I hope you love both. And I know you're a fan of Southern Gothic literature, so I'm pretty sure this is going to be up your alley. Maybe a little dark for you, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. Thank you so much for all your support, man. Jeff's a good friend. He's been very supportive of the show. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. All right. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.